Nick, transporting of stock, if they're not 100%, it's not good.
That's right. So I think in this situation, in the world we're living in at the moment, we all know, we turn on the radio, the television, we can see the news, and there's been very high profile animal welfare issues hitting the headlines lately. And I guess the reality is it's definitely a New Zealand Inc. issue. It's an image thing that we need to keep on top of. And so from the MPI's perspective, it's an important, welfare is an important thing to be seen to be doing the appropriate thing on. And so I think it's the reality is any defective stock, so I guess it's a fairly open definition, but any stock that deviates from what would be deemed normal and could be seen to be due to an animal welfare issue needs to be accompanied by a transport certificate. So the same certification process has been in place for a number of years, but I think it's timely just to kind of refresh the responsibilities as we'd say. And so there's no species distinction when it comes to transportability. The same level of concern is appropriate for all species, be it a pig or a sheep or a cow or a deer. Anything being transported to a slaughter premises that is defective in any way needs to be accompanied by a certificate.
Yes, so, given by a vet.
Given by a vet. So that certificate will be signed by the vet. There may be some specific conditions attached to it. So perhaps the vet has deemed the animal it's okay, in his or her opinion, it's okay to travel to the slaughter premises, but perhaps there may be condition that it needs to be transported not accompanied by any other animal, for instance. So in a pen on its own, a condition like that. Some of the hot or the topical things that tend to catch people out, it's stated specifically that the animal needs to bear weight on all four limbs, and so that's very important. If you've got an animal that's lame, then it needs to be looked at, and quite honestly it may be deemed not appropriate to transport it. And this can be very, very very much a concern in very bulky animals, bulls for instance. Because of the huge muscle cover, sometimes these bulls can have long bone fractures of the humerus or femur, the upper part of the front or back leg, and the level of lameness that we'd see and that we'd expect to see with them sort of dragging the leg behind them, sometimes because we've got all that muscular support, they're actually severely lame, but they can sometimes still toe touch the limb. And so it's very important that these issues are sorted out. And the problem is, if that particular animal hits the slaughter floor, the inspecting vet employed by the certifying company adjacent to the meat company, that could well end up with someone copping a serious blow for welfare issues. So even a minor issue such as a significant lameness needs to be looked at by a vet.
Wounds, of course, is another thing.
Open wounds, anything that results in a fever. So it's inappropriate for an animal that has a fever to be slaughtered. Cancer eyes are a big thing with cattle. If the cancer eye has invaded the adjacent tissue around the orbital bone where the eye sits, that's going to be a defective animal. So there are a number of conditions, open bleeding wounds, pussy wounds, all these kind of things. I guess there's two ways to look at these issues. One is, as I've mentioned and spent a significant amount of time just now talking about, is the welfare aspect, and really that's because it's very topical at the moment. But of course the other aspect of this is fitness for human consumption as well. If you've got a meat sourced from an animal that's suffering from an infectious condition and it's febrile and there's bugs going through its bloodstream, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to sort of work out that that's probably not going to be a great product for food.
So is the emphasis, does that lie with the transport driver?
It can, but primarily there's sort of dual shared responsibility. I guess the prime responsibility lies with the farmer, and so he's likely to be the guy in in the spotlight, with what's, if there was anything that's obvious to the veterinarian at the meat plant, that's going to have been a condition that in their opinion was existent at the time that the animal was loaded. But the stock transporters, generally they're very, very professional these days, and they will share some of that responsibility, and actually there would be many occasions where they would refuse. And for instance, one good example of transport companies getting involved in this situation is a lot of them set their own limits with horned animals as to who they transport, and some of those limits are much more stringent than the legal limits. So they do, most of these professional transport companies, you know, they have taken, put their hand up and kind of taken dual responsibility for policing this, which is good to see.
And I guess the reality is that that animal, if a farmer bullies the transport driver into putting that animal on, it's got to come off at the other end. And the guy who gets fined isn't the truck driver.
No, and it could be more than a fine. It could, these days, with people with welfare legislation really able to wave quite a big stick these days, it might not be a fine. It might be standing in front of a judge and actually getting your name put in the paper and having a really good smacking on the bottom.
Thank you very much indeed. Mental pictures indeed.